One of the things that we think is really important for teachers to be when they're in the classroom is the authority. We think that you should be the person who's kind of running the show, the person who's in charge. And one of the mistakes that people make when they look to become a restorative teacher is that they sometimes think that they're handing over some of that authority, that because we're including the students, because we're getting them engaged at a higher level, that they're somehow handing over their authority or their rights or their power in the classroom. And that's something that's worth a conversation about. So what I have certainly found about working restoratively is that I've handed over none of my authority. But what I have been able to do is to make a really clear distinction between two different types of authority. You see, the old school authority, or the authority that, for instance, some of the teachers that we grew up when we were, if you're a little old like me at school, may have experienced, is what we call the authoritarian teacher. The teacher who assumes a high level of authority through the exertion of their power. And what they do is they make education a bit of an adversarial game. I'm trying to get you to do something. I'm trying to force you to engage with the curriculum or to engage with your learning. And I'm trying to use my power to make you do it. And as a result, it sometimes creates, as I mentioned, a game for students where they're trying to avoid it. They're trying to get out of doing that work. As a result, we find ourselves kind of doing things to our students a lot rather than working with them. We find ourselves in a punitive kind of situation that tends to reinforce some really negative stereotypes and stigma upon our kids. It gives them the idea, for instance, that if you're getting kicked out of the classroom all the time, that you must be the naughty kid. And once you have become the naughty kid and you have kind of self-assigned that label to yourself, it's really only one thing to do when you've got some people around you who are pretty much agreeing with that label, and that is live up to it. Now, I don't know about you, but I certainly have an intention that's kind of a bit of a deep moral purpose around not assigning negative labels to young people because, one, it's not good for them, and two, it makes them more difficult to work with. So in a restorative model, rather than achieve high levels of authority in the classroom by being authoritarian, what we do is say, let's be authoritative, which means that instead of assuming or achieving a high level of authority through power, we do it through practice. We do it by putting ourselves in a position where we're able to motivate young people to experience the thrill of making progress. We create high respect environments because, let's be honest about respect, the people we respect are not necessarily just the ones that are super soft on us, nor the ones that are just super hard on us. They're the ones who actually get a really clear and a really consistent approach in their work around being both firm and fair in their work. And what we find is that young people make high levels of progress, both academically and socially, when they're in the company of a teacher who's very authoritative in their work. And that means they respond incredibly positively to that person. And that's what we're looking for in our work. A conversation for you to have amongst your colleagues this afternoon might be around three key areas. Number one, what's the distinction for you between working in an authoritarian versus authoritative way in terms of the work or the labour? How hard is it? How much time or effort needs to be put in to be authoritative versus being authoritarian in your work? The second thing you might like to think of is how effective is it? How well do young people make progress when you're authoritarian with them, both academically and socially, compared to how well they make progress, how quickly, how deeply they make progress when you're authoritative in your work? And then thirdly, which of these two approaches, being authoritarian versus being authoritative, connects most closely, most profoundly, most deeply to your purpose, to your reason for working with young people? And what I'd love is for there to be a really narrow gap between your purpose and the kind of work you do every single day. What we find is that teachers that are highly authoritative in their work feel really comfortable about the practices they deploy, and they also get a greater effect from them. But do you and your colleagues? Have a chat about that.